Welcome all you folks, cool cats and kittens. This is episode 2 of our 2022 preseason manager interview. Here with Brandon and I, we've got Travis, one of the 3 new managers joining the league. So welcome to the league, Travis. We're certainly glad to have you.
Yes, I'm glad to be here. Pleasure.
Yeah, so we just want to kick it off. Something new we're doing this year is just trying to get some background on some of our managers. As you know, we're all over the place. Not all of us have met in person yet, although we're all excited to do so in Vegas. So looking forward to that. But, just give us a quick, some of your typical kind of interview starting questions. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, that sort of thing, what you do.
I live in Moncton, New Brunswick, on the east coast of Canada, over in Atlantic Canada, I suppose. I work for Eve, I should say, not with Eve, for careerbeacon.com. Been with the company for probably going on 6 or 7 years now. And just joined with you guys this year by chance. Eve had mentioned it a couple of times. He floated the idea throughout the winter that there was possibly going to be a spot opening up. And when he first told me, actually, I was like, I don't know. I don't really want to play football. And then as he showed me the roster and as we got closer to the time where the decision was about to be made, I was like, all right, let's take a dig into it. And instantly hooked. I mean, I have a very addictive personality, so I've just been engrossed in it from the second I took it over. It's an obsession. I'm sure you guys all feel the same way. Like you get going and you feel like you're looking at every possible player that's in the league and what you can get from them, when half of them are probably shit and don't mean anything to it, but you're just trying to find something for everybody. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, totally. I think you'll fit right in. I think we have quite a few addictive personalities in this league.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's key. I mean, that's, just kind of sidebar. I think that's something that probably plays well into a dynasty league. If you can find those sorts of guys that you are going to dive in deep like that. What does a typical NFL Sunday look like for you?
It's going to start with probably going. So for us, the games tip off at 2:00. So depending if I got banged up on Saturday or not, what time I wake up, might be like a 10, 11 or 12 wake up, usually early, hopefully. Just kind of scour the board. I make quite a few bets every Sunday too. So I'm usually setting up for that. And then I'll hit the meat market at about 1 just to kill that last hour beforehand and get everything set. And then from 2:00, I'll put on the big screen. I'll probably put on Red Zone. On the side TV will be the Ravens game. And then on my laptop, whatever game's kind of hot right there or has the most, whether previous to this season would have been DraftKings implications, or betting implications. So there's a minimum of 3 screens on the go and just being a pretty big degenerate, basically.
Yeah. Sounds like you guys get into some trouble on Saturday nights in Moncton.
It's tough. They can be tough. I got bit last night by something, so a little hurt today.
I feel you. So you're a Ravens fan.
Yeah.
How long have you been a Ravens fan?
Since 2004.
Nice.
I was doing my grade 8 or grade 7 English speech. I did it on Ray Lewis and his whole murder situation, coming back and winning the Super Bowl MVP. And I was like, this guy's unreal. And then just got hooked on them from there. Then when Big Joe came in from Delaware, you could not love him then. Playoff Joe, baby.
There you go. Okay. What's like your drink of choice?
I like sour beer. I'm actually having a sour beer right now. I don't know if anyone can see. I really enjoy those. I do also have this Woodford Reserve, not cracked yet, but I do love Woodford Reserve too. So I would say beer is probably number 1. Last night I was into the rum and cokes, which is that's off brand for me, but they were some good. They were going down pretty easy. So that'd be probably number 3. I'd go beer, then whiskey, and probably wine or hard liquor after that.
Awesome. Tim, do you have any more? That covers. Those are my interests clearly. So that's for me.
We'll get along great.
I'm just writing down the topics. First, it was Moncton is the party capital of Canada. Now the topic is beer, whiskey, and wine.
I thought, we talked about going to Montreal for my bachelor party back in the day, and we ended up Korea, but I think we were in the wrong
Yeah,
province.
come down to the Maritimes or get down to Newfoundland. That'll be those guys are booze bags over there. If you think we drink a lot.
Good to know.
Travis,
Right.
maybe moving over into sort of, the league conversations.
Yep.
I think it's been great to have you join. Brandon and I just keep talking about this, but we're just thrilled about the 8 that we have right now. It's going to be a great season up ahead for us. So take us back to sort of, the moment that you joined into the league. Obviously, you weren't part of the season last season. You weren't able to participate in the expansion draft that we had, or the new manager draft that we have, Kyle and Sergey, but you did take over a full roster, a roster that was quite strong last year, throughout the season, last season, it was oftentimes a group that Brandon and I thought were just shoo-ins for the playoffs. You come in right away and you start making moves, right? And I was joking with you on one of the trades that we did, which is I feel like I got more trade conversations done with you in 8 hours of you joining the league compared to the last 12 months. So talk to us through that entire start to sort of where you are at Jersey.
Yeah, so that was probably obviously the roster would make the biggest difference in whether you're gonna be tempted to take the team over or not. And the roster was pretty loaded, honestly. There's a lot of he had a lot of patchwork in the RB section with Latavius and Devontae. I assume he probably had, well, I guess not. He wouldn't have had any like J.K. Dobbins or any of the Ravens rookies. But the fill-in work of the RB section was a little bit weak, and there's not much wide receiver depth. But outside of that, the quarterbacks were stacked. Obviously, the running backs prior to me trading them away with Henry and Kamara were stacked. When I saw that Jerry Jeudy was in there and Mike Williams, it was pretty straightforward for that situation. And then obviously Kyle Pitts was seemed to be everybody's number one trade target from when I joined. So yeah, it was a pretty easy decision from that point, taking that roster over. The cool thing about it, because this is the first time I've ever been in a dynasty, so I didn't entirely grasp the drafting process and how pivotal those picks really are, and forecasting out classes, because I watch a ton of college football every Saturday, so I know a lot of the player group and the studs and kind of the up and comers. But when you never played it, you don't really put it together and care enough unless they go to your team in the draft, like your fandom team. So it was, once I got into there and saw kind of the return that you can get and how loaded the upcoming classes are, in my opinion, I thought that was awesome. It's such a cool way to kind of work trades through, and you're not getting necessarily the immediate return that you would think, but that's the whole point of the dynasty, is that you're not going to go for win now every single year unless your lineup's absolutely stacked. Sorry, my dog's barking. So it was sweet. I was fired up. It's been, like I said, I've been absolutely hooked from kind of the second I came in. So it's been a lot of fun. I can't wait to keep going. Have this conversation for the next 30 years.
Yes, absolutely.
Count my 21 trophies too.
You kind of touched on something that I know Tim and I have talked about a bunch, but there's a lot of first-time dynasty guys in this league, which I think is fun. But even just having like a year under our belt, there's so many learning experiences that I had over that first year. A lot of mistakes, a lot of not fully grasping how it works. And like you said, alluding to the draft picks, I started off and kind of was throwing those around willy-nilly, thinking that I had, this perfect roster. I think guys like Tim, just kind of getting the history of it a little bit, took advantage of a little bit of that. He went that rebuilding route right off the bat, and really committed to that. Leading into kind of my next question, what do you think as far as your composition of your roster at this point? Are you happy with how it looks? Are there any areas that are just glaring to you at this point that you want to adjust or change, or what direction are you going?
So I know it's not really going to make a ton of sense when I say it, because I had a pretty stacked running back situation, but with Derrick Henry, he's almost 29 now, so he's definitely on the back nine there. Kamara's only, I believe, 26, so that was kind of a tougher decision in that move. So having received Najee in that deal, it makes me feel a lot better about shoring up the future of that running back position, but I don't really have any depth in it, so I'm definitely struggling heavily there. That's kind of hopeful for next year's draft, 2023 and 2024, to pick up some key pieces for that. receiver, like having Jared Judy and his new situation with, having Russ there in that new situation is huge. I'm very high on him. I've always been a huge Mike Williams fan since his Clemson days. I just thought he had unreal ball skills. He's so big and so powerful. I think he's only about 26, 27. Yeah, he's 27. So not too bad there. And outside of them, though, again, while picking up Rondale Moore actually from you, Tim, that was another piece. But with the draft situation that Arizona went through, like everything kind of shifts. Like that draft just kind of shifted everything. It was bizarre. Picking up Mecole Hardman in the deal on the draft day too, I felt good about. So I feel pretty good about my receiver core for the years to come. Having Joe Burrow, obviously, and Rodgers for like a minimum of the next 3 years. Hopefully he just keeps playing. QB's a bit lacking after that. I got Jameis, so that's kind of a dart throw there. I don't know what to expect. Although Kyle did say he's a lock for 32 TDs, so yeah. He's not a liar too. He's an honest guy. But yeah, I think overall, like the composition's pretty good. Again, they're like running back. I have a lot of random ass running back pieces that I just don't like. They don't really have any value right now, but depending on what could happen roster wise or depth chart wise, then maybe you find some hidden value in there. But outside of that, it's extremely weak. So that's definitely a point that I'm going to be focusing on in the upcoming years, is shoring up that position and kind of trying to find another key piece to go with Naj. So yeah, I'm overall quite happy. I would say that's definitely the biggest issue that I have, and I should probably draft a quarterback here in the next couple of years. So I've got a couple of targets, obviously, between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud next year. Maybe get one of those guys and shore that position up to go along with Joe, and we'll see how it goes. But the thing with like obviously quarterback drafting, like they're so hit or miss for the last 20 years. Like there's 10 guys that are serviceable every year, so it's just tough. If you don't have one of the big studs, then everyone's kind of in the same boat.
So playing into that a little bit, Travis, after you took over this roster, I think your very first move was for Kyle Pitts. And then from there, you started to shore up on sort of the draft picks by trading some of the aging running backs like Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry. Was your thought right after taking over the roster, did that develop for you in terms of a timeline you want to go for or anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm very high on next year's draft. I didn't really, outside of the obvious receiver plays like this year, like the Chris Olave that I'm obsessed with. So when you draft him, Brandon, we can have a chat. And so basically outside of like Olave and a couple other receivers this year, I wasn't extremely high on anything. So it wasn't a huge concern for me to kind of stay with those picks this year. The 2023 class, like I said, I'm very high on that. So I believe I've now made moves that I have 10 picks in next year's draft. And then I believe 7 for 2024. So it just, once I understood and fully grasped the dynasty aspect of it and how, it's not always a win now mode. And sometimes you're just paying your entry fee to kind of shore up for the next few years. So once I kind of grabbed that, it made it a lot easier at first. Because when I looked at the roster, I was like, this is an extremely serviceable roster. You can compete with this, but it'll compete for this year, next year, and maybe one more. And then I'm kind of absolutely screwed. So I figured it was best to just attack it now, get the most value for a lot of guys. Like the Pitts deal, I could trade him really at any point. He's going to be worth a lot. But it was just, I felt the best way to do it now. And it was nice to come in. I was hot and horny to get going with the league too. So he caught me at the perfect time.
I have to know how many people estimate reached out to you for Pitts.
I believe 5 people from the league reached out on Pitts. There was a minimum of 3 trades offered from different people, and I believe 2 others had just asked about him.
That's awesome. I mean, I don't know about you, Tim. I love to hear that though. Just going from and I mean, not to say that last year was dead. We made lots of trades last year, but it really circled between me, Tim, John, and Ryan. And who am I forgetting? But anyways,
Eves.
Eves. I mean, Eves had a stacked roster though, and not that Eves wasn't active, but he didn't need to blow it up at halfway through the season. So I love hearing that. I love hearing that. It's like fresh meat.
Right.
Come in the waters with some of these guys. That
exactly. It's tough. Like, man, when you're running a fantasy league and there's 4 guys out of the league that are actually active and entertaining trades or even interacting and messaging and shit, like it kind of sucks, right? Like it's very difficult to keep the engagement, and then nobody really cares from that point, especially if it's a dynasty too. You're like, well, if this guy's just going to have this dude locked up for 8 years,
right?
It's shitty.
you fall in love with guys too, or new guys kind of fit your timeline. Like I'm thinking AJ Dillon right now. If AJ Dillon had been on a team that I couldn't access him, like for me, he fits exactly what I want to do at this point in time. If he had been stuck on one of these other teams, like that would kill me every single day. That I couldn't access.
Yeah, Travis, I want to, just for the sake of everyone sort of on this, because I think one of the cool things that we can do, especially with the new managers, there's been so many off-season moves today, right? Yeah. And in your case, and Kyle and Sergey's case, all those moves have happened over the last 3 weeks. I love it. I think we're already surpassed the number of trades that we did last season in this off-season. One, it makes sense. It's the off-season where you expect a lot of these trades to happen. But two, like you said, it's going from 5 active managers to a full 8. And we got fresh capital across the board in terms of draft picks and managers coming in wanting to do their own thing, set a new direction. So just out of my curiosity, I want to sort of start reviewing some of the trades. I think you've made 3 trades so far. So maybe we'll go start off with your very first one on Pitts, because we're on that topic now.
Yep.
It just as my background, right? Like Pitts is a player that I've been wanting to get since last year. I've chatted with Brandon multiple times, and I feel like, hey, I'm really close to being able to get Pitts from Adam. There were so many conversations that we've had, and it just never went anywhere. So I knew as soon as, Adam was gracious enough to sort of, part on this league with this new job that he took on, and we had a new manager coming in, I was like, I got to target Pitts. And then the first thing that you do is you sort of put him on the block. And I think that was, like you said, maybe you're responding to just the 5 inbound inquiries on Kyle Pitts. Talk to me about sort of, your thoughts on the trades and you deciding ultimately going with the package that I offered, but just want to sort of get your thoughts on, one, making that decision to trade Pitts, and then what ultimately swayed you from picking, the trade package that you got from me.
Yeah. So the Pitts situation, my train of thought was more that, like, I know he has the potential to be kind of a generational tight end in that situation. To me, there's a bit more uncertainty to the situation than what it appears on the surface. Like when Ridley comes back, there's a big factor there. I knew they were targeting receivers in the draft this year. I believe they took Drake London at 8, I want to say, right? So now that Drake London's there, like that's another mouth. Mariota at the quarterback, I just wasn't sure on. I know he was sick in Oregon, but he's been a bit of a bum so far. So he was stressing me out, and just the pick situation, I knew I could get a good pick return for him. I'm really high on Brock Bowers in 2024, as I'm sure everybody in the world is. So I was kind of more moving towards that's going to be my play, that I feel I can kind of swap them and get fair or equal value. Obviously, it depends what situation Brock goes into in 2024 to see how serviceable it's going to be. But just his skills and his skill set, I feel, is like extremely set for the NFL. So I felt personally like I was giving myself an opportunity to get to Brock in 2024 and get a similar return from Pitts. I know they're not even remotely close really to the same player, but time will tell, I suppose. So that's kind of where my head was on the deal. And then obviously when you come in, everybody's interested, and I was like, well, shit, let's see what we can get for him. Going with your deal it was more, you were the only one that was really offering me the pick package that I wanted, like to swap not to necessarily just get a first for it, but to swap. I knew it would be easier to get the job done to swap this year's first, which I wasn't extremely high on, as I mentioned before, to get to 2024 first. And with my timeline, I don't think I'm going to be extremely win heavy in the upcoming years. So I should have a relatively high pick in that year. Depends on how the lottery situation rolls out, of course. But yeah, your deal was just kind of the one that worked. Again, I was ready to go as soon as I got in the league too. So you caught me honestly at the perfect time. It was really the perfect storm for you to get Pitts. It was new manager coming in. He's ready to go. He's excited to make some moves and make a splash. And that was just the one that worked out. It made the most sense for me to get that 2024 first.
Yeah. And I think just my last question on the Pitts aspect, because the thing that I never asked you directly is originally the starting offer that you wanted, the package was just give me your 2024 first for Pitts. More than happy to do that. And obviously I ended up including Rondale Moore and Khalil Herbert in there just because I just felt like that in itself was sort of undervaluing Pitts. The pick alone, I mean. And then you surprised me out of nowhere, because obviously I told you that I was interested in your first this year as well, given that it was such a high, odd pick. But you asked me if I'd be willing to sort of include this year's late first for your first or next year's late first for your first this year, which is the 101 odds that ended up going 102. Talk to me about that. I've never heard that from you directly. So I just wanted to sort of hear if you think that the value of like maybe a 107 next year is basically the 102 this year. I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's exactly. That's kind of what I felt, where the Breece Hall situation, I'm just curious to see how that's going to work out. Like I wasn't going to take him, I don't think. So it didn't really make sense to me to have that. I knew that pick meant way more to somebody else than it did to me at the moment. So whether Breece goes first or, I mean, I'm not even sure who's going to be number 2. I guess it's up to you at this point, so you'll know. I just really wanted Olave, so I felt like I could get him ideally in the second round. I don't think that's going to work out anymore, just the way the draft played out. I also didn't, in my own stupidity, I didn't look at everybody else's draft capital at the time. So I didn't really realize that Brandon had so many picks loaded for next year. Then when it happened, I looked at it and I really got engrossed in. And I was like, okay, this might have been a bit of a loss on my end. But I don't know. Again, I just thought that the trade-off to get the 2024 kind of made sense to me. It felt like it was the way to get there. So time will tell for sure. I think it was definitely that was the rookiness showing off there, where I was like, okay, let's get something done, let's go. And I didn't fully project out and see exactly what was going to unfold with it, but overall, I'm pretty pleased with the way it worked. I think, like I said, with the draft picks that I now have, like having 10 next year and 7 and 24, with multiple firsts in each one, it just kind of made the most sense for me in my timeline. Because when we met Tim and you were preaching timeline, I was wrapping my head around it, and I was like, okay, well, this roster is pretty good right now, as I mentioned, but it's aging in the running back category, the quarterbacks a little bit. So if I'm timelining what's my best class here, and I felt again next year and the year after were the best. So it just made the most sense for me in terms of that. That's been like thinking timeline-wise is the game changer, right? Because you're so used to, I'm programmed to come through like playing a lot of DraftKings and shit. You're thinking about that day. It's all that you think about. You don't forecast out whatsoever. It's just a fresh slate every single week. So to get that full mindset shift, which I don't think I had at the time, but now I've kind of gotten there, is pretty enlightening at this point.
Yeah, and I think just to jump in, I think you had that kind of moment a lot faster than I did, especially. I think Dynasty, when you come from Redraft or you come from something like DraftKings, it's completely different. Like,
yeah,
you just have to future forecast, and everyone has different strategies. Everyone's on a different timeline. We're not all just trying to win this year. And I think, it offers up a lot of opportunities to, make trades that help both sides. But there's also the opportunities to make trades where people are like, really? Like, that's what you did? And I mean, the value is there for you. And I don't disagree whatsoever with any of the moves you've made. Obviously, I think we're doing similar things at different to different degrees. But yeah, I can already hear that, we're in similar mindsets. We're both hunting those young guys, throwing out the Brock Bowers, you've done your homework. So that's exciting. Because I feel like you and I are probably going to be butting heads on a lot of these guys going forward. So I think it'll be fun.
Maybe I think, Travis, your second move. What was your second move? Was it the 3-team trade that you guys pulled off? Was that your second, or did you have another move after that?
So the second deal was with Eves. That was the Eckler and Derrick Henry Kamara trade.
Yeah, so that one, again, that was more the situation where I was thinking like, okay, I need to make a decision on Henry here. Like, obviously he's unreal and his workload is just ridiculous, but I really kind of didn't want to be stuck with him post that point. It made it a bit more difficult to see where I was going to go. So he was very high on getting both of them because he's in a super heavy win now mode. So he kept offering me, like, there was a bunch of packages that came through for him. Just finding the one that was accepted here. Okay, there it is. So yeah, it was basically, so it was Knox and Najee Harris, his 23 second, 23 third, and his 2024 fourth for Ertz, Henry, Kamara, and McLaurin. So I know, like, McLaurin's another guy that I'm not like super high on comparative to everybody else. I get like all the skills and everything are there, but like, to me, the way that I view the situations is who's throwing, like, it's so heavy to me who's throwing them the ball, what their quarterback situation is like. And a lot of the guys that everyone's super high on currently, they're in unproven situations, and it doesn't, like, I know that doesn't mean that it's not going to work out for those guys, but I'm a wait and see kind of guy. That's more so the way that I'm going with it. So I wasn't too worried about getting rid of McLaurin. Again, Derek just being older, I was trying to move away from him. Getting Naj back, I felt like that was the centerpiece that I can kind of move around. So I know I've kind of floated around the idea of moving Burrow, but the more that I've settled into the league and the more that I've forecasted out and checked my timeline and kind of firmed up on it, I don't feel like I want to move him anymore, unless it was for something comparable, like another young QB that I'm very high on. So having Naj and having Joe kind of set in stone, those are my two like huge building blocks that I wanted to move forward with. Having Jerry Jeudy, I felt like I shored up a wide receiver there. Mike Williams, still, he's over the hill. So that wasn't a big deal for me to move on from Derek. Obviously, Kamara would have been nice to keep, but there's a bit of uncertainty with his situation, obviously, with his hearing getting pushed back into July. So I didn't really know. That probably ensures that he won't be suspended this season, but likely next season for a bit, depending how long it is, if he gets anything. So that was just kind of a way to get a good return from now. I felt like I had to give Derek and Kamara to get Naj. I don't know if that's overpaying or not, but it could be fringe overpaying or it could be fair market value. Ertz obviously is pretty fucking old at this point for the league, so I just didn't feel like I had too much left with him. And getting Dawson Knox, again, with my projection of wanting to get to Brock Bowers in 2024, it made it easier to move on from any of these tight end moves. So yeah, I felt like the draft capital that returned with the next year's second and third, and then a fourth in 2024 is just kind of a throw in. But there's a lot of value in those later rounds that just isn't really surface value. So I felt like it was a good, solid package that came for both of us. I know when I look at it on the surface, to me, I'm like, it seems like a bizarre trade, and there's a lot going to one side. But
I actually thought, when I saw that trade though, it totally made sense, right? I felt like Travis, you had picked the timeline that you wanted to build for, and you're trading. Both Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara are probably the highest value today than they'll have a year from now or any other future years. And I felt like it was really a Najee being sent out for Derrick Henry, Kamara. And then the value got on Travis, the McLaurin trade was basically the picks and then a little surplus value there on Knox and the rest of the players coming in over your way. So I felt like you made it. I really like that trade for both of you guys, because Eves needed to make that trade with all the moves that's happening in the rest of the league with the tiers that he wanted to get on top of. And I felt like you got the picks that you wanted, and you went younger, right, to fit your timeline.
Exactly.
Those are four old dudes. I mean, even McLaurin. I mean, he's not a young wide receiver. I mean, you sold off four pieces that aren't going to be part of your winning formula. They wouldn't be on your team, when you start to really contend anyway. So I like the move too. I thought it was a great move.
Yep, no, it's good. It gives me more confidence.
Okay, so then the final move, the kind of the infamous move at this point, just given that we hadn't seen a three-team trade yet in this league. We heard a little bit about kind of how it came together, but any other insights into how this trade kind of what came to be?
Oh, Kyle's been hounding me to get Stafford. He really wanted Stafford. I feel like I was a pawn in their scheme though, now that they made the trade afterwards. So I kind of got on that, and I realized it afterwards. But I'm happy with the return I got. Obviously, I was pretty high for getting Nicole Hardman in. I know Mahomes has touted that anytime he had to fill in for Tyreek last year or in his previous seasons, that he's been extremely serviceable. He's a speedy guy, so I was pretty pleased with getting him. And then obviously they drafted Sky Moore yesterday, so that kind of fucking sucks. But I don't know, you just can't really think about it that way, I guess. But getting the draft capital back, so I got the 2022 fourth, and then again another second and third for next year's draft, which is, to me, those picks are so key, because I'm just loading up on picks for next year's draft, which is a class I'm super high on. So it just makes a shitload of sense from my end. I wanted to keep Stafford, honestly, because I know he's 34, but he's unreal and his situation's amazing. I feel like he could play for another 6 or 7 years and be serviceable every one of those years. So that was kind of a difficult one for me to settle on. But once the package kind of came together, we tried a ton of packages. Kyle and I probably sent 8 different Stafford trades back and forth, and just neither one of us were giving the other exactly what they wanted. Eventually I tried to get Tua in that deal, which I thought would have been unreal, but he wasn't willing to give Tua. So he wanted to in a different deal, but for this one to work specifically, he threw in Jameis, and maybe I'll recapture Jameis's, 2019 or 2018 when he was QB4. So maybe I'll recapture that glory, Mr. 30-30. Hayden Hurst. I think Hayden Hurst is going to have a big year. Everybody sleep on Hayden Hurst. I know he might be a bum, but he's in a really good situation this year. He's got nobody behind him. So maybe that's another one he'll return to his Falcons glory. What was he? T8. So, and I remember Tim when we were watching the draft too, you're like, yeah, well, tight end 8 is basically like tight end 15. That's a very good point. I thought of it afterwards. I was like, yeah, that's pretty solid. So hopefully he has an absolute breakout and Joe just hits him. But at the same time, Cincinnati has, I believe it's like the 30th lowest rate of passing to tight ends in the league with all the wide receiver depth that they have. So it's just a prayer basically. But again, I'm just aiming for Brock in 2024. So the tight end position to me isn't really huge right now. But I thought he would be like a nice bye-week plug-and-play type deal. So I was able to throw him in. The Mecole situation we went over, which I don't know how I feel about that yet. It does suck that they drafted him. They drafted Sky Moore, but I don't know. Mecole's still really good. So I feel like I can get some good usage out of him there. It allowed me just basically to get the picks that I was looking for Stafford. But the only thing with the Stafford deal, like I said, is I honestly feel like he could probably still be serviceable for like 6 years. So this might come back to bite me, but maybe Jameis will give me half the value. But I have Rodgers and Burrow at the same time too, so it wasn't a massive loss to me. And if I'm targeting either Bryce Young or CJ Stroud next year, then it's just a move I felt like I had to make at the time. I could hold him maybe halfway through the season and get a different value, maybe a slightly better QB situation or something like that, but at the time, it just felt right. The flurry of trade action that goes on right now, too, you're like, oh, we got to get something done right now. When really, it doesn't have to go that way, but everybody's just striking while the iron's hot. So you don't want to be left out of the party.
I think what's kind of nice, too, I'm going to kind of segue this, just given that you and I seem to be the only two teams that have kind of embraced this rebuild to different degrees. I don't mean to lump you in with my team. Obviously, I'm on a whole lower level there, but I think what's kind of nice too is that you can take a little bit more risk to try and just find some of these lottery tickets and not have to necessarily worry too much about whether or not they perfectly pan out. Someone like Hayden Hurst is a perfect example. If he starts to put up top 6 sort of tight end, just given the way that tight ends are so lacking in the league right now, that's a good trade chip for a contender that might give you something more that fits your timeline or a draft pick or something like that. Yep. If he doesn't pan out, it's probably not going to affect your timeline. It's really not going to affect your team once, you're contending.
Exactly.
So, yeah. And it looks like you're well on your way to already accruing these lottery tickets, for lack of a better word. I know I've heard you kind of talk on it a few times, but the 2023 draft, I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit, just given, again, that I don't think we're going to talk about the draft too much outside of you and I's team. So whatever you're willing to share, obviously. But I'm obviously very high on that draft as well. You've mentioned CJ, you've mentioned Bryce Young, there's some bomb running backs coming out, Jackson Smith and Jigba. I saw the Pitt. It sounds like the Pitt, what is it, Addison? I heard he's transferring. I think I heard maybe Alabama, probably USC. To me, there's maybe 10, maybe 11 players in next year's draft that I think easily would go first overall in this year's.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on all that?
I think if depending how my pick plays out this year, I have 2 firsts in there. One of them will be, I believe, one of them's from Eve. I want to say, possibly not. I can't remember who the secondary first is that I got in the next year's draft, but
yeah, it would be mine.
It'd be yours. Is that one? Okay, yeah, it's correct. So that's probably going to be a pretty relatively high pick. That won't be a lottery protected pick, I don't imagine. So I'm probably looking to go more like Bijan Robinson early, get some running back, because I feel like he's just got the NFL ready body. Like he should be able to produce. Obviously, it depends what situation he goes into. If he gets buried and I don't even know where, let's say he gets put into like a jet situation from the past few years and he just gets handed the ball 18 times a game, moves it 2 yards a time. That sucks. And you just burn out a couple of years on him. But hopefully he gets into the situation. That's something that I found was a big learning experience for me too this year. Is next year I'll probably wait a little bit till the draft just to see the situation the guys are going into before I make moves to kind of plan around it. It's just, I got into the excitement of it this year and was ready to go. So I think taking the longer approach next year will be will be more beneficial. But yeah, to get back to your question, sorry, I want to go towards Bijan. I kind of want was it Keishawn Booty at receiver. I think that's like more my primary target is definitely to go RB wide receiver. I'm gonna wait for 2024. Obviously, I've said a bunch of times for the tight end position. So yeah, I think it should be a pretty it's going to be a very fruitful draft. It'll just be very interesting. I can't wait to see who takes Clemson's QB. Was it I can't even pronounce his last name.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yes, exactly. So I think he's really bad. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen in that situation. I think right now he's projected like as a top 10 pick, or he's in the conversation to be in the top 15, let's say. So he should be probably the third quarterback off the board, which depending how this season plays out for him, I just don't really see his accuracy this past year was just so poor on every deep ball and every ball on the sideline. So that's one that'll be interesting. I'm just kind of rambling on it right now at this point, just because I don't know if anyone will be that high on him, but I feel like we get so caught up in media hype for guys in the draft. Like it really kind of throws everything off, that somebody who's, if you watch a lot of the games, like this guy isn't really that good, but we can be convinced otherwise. Like the Darnold years and stuff like that, where you watch them in college, Josh Allen was not Josh Allen, sorry, Josh Rosen is the perfect example. Where you watch any UCLA game back then, you're like, this guy's horrible. But the media is like, oh, he's unreal. He's a top 10 pick. He's so NFL ready. He comes out and he absolutely stinks. Like, no shock if you watch him play. I love looking at stats and stuff, but watching the games and just seeing a guy play is so pivotal to me. Just seeing him in the situation and how he runs, there's so many intangibles to it that you kind of go through and you're like, okay, he's either going to be good or he's not. And it's all your own personal perception. So I'm sure we all feel like we know what we were talking about when we watch them, but until they actually get in the league and kind of get going, it's too hard to say.
I'll be the first to admit, I do not know what I'm looking at when I look at college players. I think Brandon and Travis, you both have a huge leg up on the league just with how much you guys watch college football. And I've been trying to get into it, but just even looking at 2023 draft is the topic that we're talking about. If you look at this time last year, everyone thought Spencer Rattler was going to be QB1. People thought Isaiah Spiller was going to be RB1 over Brees, and he's not even picked yet, and it's day 3 today.
Exactly. The Chargers. It's actually a pretty good spot for him. Yeah, he's with the Chargers.
But yeah, I mean, I think it just goes to show too, like looking at next year, we're obviously high on Bryce Young. You know, people are high up on, I think, Caleb Williams, who I think is at Oklahoma now, speaking of Spencer Rattler.
He's
Bijan
at
Robinson's.
USC now.
Oh, he's transferred to USC, yeah. And then you had, Bijan Robinson. I mean, that's been a RB1 in Devy leagues for the last 3 years, ever since he committed to Texas. Plus you got Jackson Nigba, and I think he's going to be right now receiver 1, but who knows what all happens. So the question to you two, that I think this is just a good avenue for me to ask you both, as both of you who are looking to rebuild for the future. 2023 draft obviously looks very strong. 2024 draft looks stronger than 2022, maybe not as strong as what could be legendary in 2023. Travis, you've got 10 picks. I think you've got 6 firsts and seconds. So 2 firsts and 4 seconds, I believe. Brandon's got 5 firsts and I think 2 seconds. So you will represent quite a bit in terms of the draft power come next year. And I think second round picks are also going to be quite great next year just because of the depth at the top as well. How do you plan on sort of, working with each other? I'm just curious. I have both of you on the call. So I'm just curious around how do you plan on sort of working with each other? Because you guys are going to be battling out for the future of Dynasty.
I know I honestly feel like with the amount of picks that Brandon has, like I'm pretty convinced especially with the receiver depth that you're going to be able to get this year, and then I think you have another 5 first round picks next year. Yeah. Like you just said, Tim. So your team's, in my personal opinion, like your team's going to be sick in 2 years at most. Like all these guys, depending how they play out next year, based on how you draft this year, I'm sure you're going to go pretty receiver heavy. And I think you alluded to it in the draft, you might go 5 receivers from 4 to 8. Like it's entirely possible to go that way. So yeah, I think I'm probably going to be playing a bit of catch up on you. because you have those strung together picks. So it's such an advantage to be able to just pick. You don't have to have any specific, like, I have to reach for this guy right now, because you got 3 picks that are right behind you lined up that you can just take whoever the hell you want. So you just put them in your queue and boom, boom, boom. So I feel like I'm going to be a little bit behind you. My timeline might take a little bit, like a year or two after yours to kind of piece together. I obviously don't know exactly who you're targeting and where you want to go. And I've alluded to some guys like Olave and stuff that I'm interested in this year that I felt was probably, in my opinion, the best receiver in the draft. And so I'm hoping that you either deal him to me or find a way
no
to
chance he slips past his 108.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a Buckeye fan too, so
I heard that. Once I heard that, I was like, oh shit, I'm out of luck here. So like, we're going to be battling for CJ. We're going to be battling for Olave. I mean, I've got no chance at Olave now, having traded the first. But yeah, I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm pretty certain you definitely got the upper hand for sure. But I think
I will say, I am envious of the fact that you have guys that, on your roster right now that we already know are going to be stars. I'm doing this, as Tim phrased it, like the indexing kind of strategy, right? Where it's just spray and pray, I'm shotgunning the first couple rounds. But best case scenario, I find a Joe Burrow. Best case scenario, I find a Najee Harris to insert into my lineup. Best case scenario, I find a Jerry Jeudy this year. So there's a lot of like, everything has to kind of line up perfectly. I will say and I'll get into it more when I do my interview, but my strategy is like, 2 years down after that 2023 draft, maybe going into 2024, that's where I want my door to start to open. If everything goes right. I know, like, of course it's situational based. I'm not going to put all my eggs in that basket. What if, I have the chance of drafting Bijan and he goes to the Jets, or, like now, that wouldn't be a great scenario. So I know that it's going to take these guys time to develop, and I'm probably going to miss on quite a few of them. But, the flexibility of knowing that I have all these options, and it's basically a blank slate at this point for me to just plug and play whatever I want into my starting lineup and not be attached to any sort of like age or things like that. That's what I like.
Yep.
I also like, and I think you kind of alluded to it too, once you notice that, like, I had all these picks, I think it's going to do nothing but increase the value of first round picks, which I think could benefit both of us, just given that, you've already started to accrue some, and, second round picks too, in good drafts, just as valuable. So I know Tim and I have talked about it a lot. That's something we're interested in seeing how it plays out, just the chemistry of the league, how it works when contenders, teams that maybe are falling off a little bit. Now there's really no first round picks to go and get all the way through 2025. It's gonna make some interesting dynamics for teams trying to rebuild down the line.
Those drafts are going to be interesting. Like when we're in Vegas and we're standing there and it's just you and I going back and forth for a full round.
Yeah, I know.
Pretty funny.
I think it's going to be super fun. And I think the rest of the league is, unless they feel like they can be contended for the next 3-4 years, and we've alluded to who Brandon and I think are going to be in that tier come 3-4 years down the road. But unless you're in that, I think obviously Brandon's in the best situation for that. And I think, Travis, you just make the cut too. Like, just, you've already gotten picks. You have 10, next season, for example, you have a ton of seconds. I think the value of the 2023 first are going to be next to impossible to get, just because of your 2 timelines. And I'm hopeful, like, I think this is the only shot I really have to strengthen my roster, is that East potentially drops out a lot, like into lottery this upcoming season, and I luck into that, right? But I look at, I think the window for Brandon opens up after 2023 drafts, of that strong draft. He's got 5 firsts. He's gonna hit on at least probably 3. I think the 2024 drafts of where Brandon has everything locked up is probably the time where Brandon starts to sort of do what I did in the offseason, where he uses some of that extra ammunition to get proven players. And I think that's where you're going to be above the fray, Travis, and being able to sort of make the moves happen. And that's the 2024 beginning is probably where the picks start to open up. I'm actually really curious what happens next offseason, right? Because between you two, we know first drafts are already at large, but I think we're going to have movements in the offseason of players that want to rebuild. Come the next offseason is when the new fresh rosters of the 2025 picks come in to our picks to be able to trade.
Right.
So I'm really curious around sort of, how you guys think about sort of movement of first picks, and Travis, maybe how you think about your opening of the windows, just so the rest of the league can get a sense around, how we can project out the value to first going forward.
Yeah, so that was kind of something that again, for next year specifically, where Brendan had so many of the first, it was like, for one, there was no way I could get to any of them because there's no way he's going to move them. But it kind of makes me move my timeline out, right? Like I have to project further out because I'm just like, well, I'm going to miss on this person. Like a lot of people that you're super high on, you just are going to miss on them no matter what because you don't have the pick available to get to them. So it kind of just shifted everything forward, I guess. And that's where I kind of keyed in on 2024 to start. It doesn't really work out that well because it's kind of the same situation again. Although, how many firsts do you have in 2024, Brandon? Is it
5?
You would leave? You have 5 again? Yeah. So for the next 3 drafts, like you have 5 first-round picks minimum.
Yeah,
which is nuts. So it kind of, I don't know how I'm pretty certain that you're not going to want to move any of them. So I don't know how the league's really going to get to them whatsoever. Like you said, Tim, the 2025 is really what's going to be in play next year. It is very interesting. Like you said, until you said that, I wasn't really thinking about it, that is going to open up an entirely new dynamic trades because everyone's back with a fresh batch, right? But we all only have 1 first-round pick. So it depends. I don't know. I personally, where I'm so stacked in kind of rounds 2 and 3 of those drafts, I probably won't be moving it whatsoever, and I'll keep my 2 firsts in there because I can't imagine getting access to any more. So I don't know what the deal would have to be for me to kind of move those picks for the timeline that I've picked and what I've set out. I'm pretty set in stone, and now that I'm getting more comfortable with the process of the league and understanding the dynamics of the rosters and how everything kind of plays out for everybody in over the high level overview sense, I don't really foresee much movement in it whatsoever. Like I think it's just going to be a couple drafts of Brandon and I just kind of going back and forth and picking up a bunch of guys and hoping we hit on them, and everyone else is just kind of picking around. But there's so much value in every single draft that we don't even think about. So everybody that kind of gets picked, that's just whether it's a random throw in the dark for somebody, like it's probably a lot of them are going to hit, not a lot, but an amount of them are going to hit, and it could be a game-changing player. So I don't know if to get back to your question, I suppose I don't know if the trade side of it's necessarily going to work out. I don't see anyone really being able to access those picks, but you never know. Maybe. Well, actually, if you traded away Brandon Allen, or if you traded away Josh Allen, then I can't imagine you're going to move any of those picks. There's probably a 0% chance.
Yeah, I mean, as it stands right now, and I'll get more into it when I do my little interview. But going forward, I mean, I'm also not super high on this year's draft, but again, I think there'll be some talent that comes out of it, especially at wide receiver, which is where I want to start my rebuild. 2023 is going to be damn near impossible to get those picks from me. I've been high on this draft for a long time, and so I've kind of done my roster baiting to a lot of these players for years now. So I'm excited to get a bunch of them. I think where it opens up for me, depending on how I do and kind of my lottery luck in 2023. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm looking to trade some of those 2024 picks following that draft, just based on what the composition of my team is. If I've been able to fill out my quarterbacks and I've got a Bryce Young in there and some other young talent, and now I've loaded up on wide receivers this year and running backs next year. Maybe I've taken a Michael Mayer next year at tight end, and I'm feeling good there. The fact that I've had 10 first-round picks over 2 years, I don't know that I necessarily, to maximize value, I don't think adding another 5 in 2024 would necessarily be the best thing. So looking at more like win now players in 2024, I think would be my strategy. But yeah, I mean, it all changes. And I think we've seen that in this league too, just the way teams are bouncing around, whether or not they're contending or not. I've had some deals come along that, you just can't say no to, and you kind of have to embrace where you are in the league. And I think that's probably the best route.
2 questions to basically rank where you think the rest of the league is going to stack up at the end of this season. And then after that, I'd love to sort of hear your dynasty outlook in the next 3 to 5 years as well. So let's start with this season. How do you sort of think about the tiers or the ultimate sort of finish, the season finish for this year?
Okay, so I think you're a clear-cut number 1, Tim. Your team's just absolutely loaded. I can't really envision a situation where you aren't in the finals, but obviously anything can happen. But it's the way that it stands right now. I think you've got a very high chance. Just looking at I really like Ryan's roster. Like I think his roster is sick. I think he won last year too, right? So he was the inaugural champion. Yeah. So obviously his team is pretty good. I would see I'd go you, Ryan. I think Eve's team's quite good, especially adding Cup and Stafford yesterday. I believe they made the deal, so I'd give him number 3 slot. At 4, that's a good question. At 4, I would say probably either Kyle or Sergey. It's kind of a toss up for me between the two of them, and then rounding the bottom half out, I suppose it would then fall into to full Chubb, then probably myself and Brandon, or you could kind of interchange the two of us just depending how it works out. But yeah, it's I would say that's probably the way that's going to unfold. I when I look at your team, Tim, like it's nuts. If you want to move Travis Etienne, by the way, just let me know. So yeah, like I can't really see how you're not going to be right there. Last year, did it work out that were you in the finals against Ryan?
No, it was Eves and Ryan in the finals, and then Brandon and I in the thing. So I actually started out last season at 1-4, and then finished out at 6-3 to sneak into the playoffs. But that was really, I should have never made that roster. It was just 2 things happened, which is I got lucky on the Jonathan Taylor trade in week 3. And then Derrick Henry's injury in week 9 with Adam,
Right.
The roster he took over. That was the roster that, made the room for me to be able to sneak in there at 4.
So to be honest, Tim's roster, I'm kind of emulating what I think Tim set out to do at the beginning of last season. Not to the same degree. Tim still had some good talent on his squad, but it was like I think, Tim, it was pretty much supposed to be not necessarily a tank season, but a strong rebuild.
Oh, it's absolutely supposed to be a tank season. Just Jonathan Taylor didn't let me do that, but yeah.
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 When you get the most dynamic player in the league, it's kind of changes things for you. It puts you into overdrive.
Yeah. And I think, we'll talk about it more with Tim's interview, but it also really affected his timeline. And I think led to a lot of moves. So, and again, every move is everybody else's move is a learning experience, right? Every outcome of trades and outcomes of seasons, I feel like is something you have to learn from in Dynasty.
So Travis, you talked about the season rankings at large. It seems like there's a clear cut in terms of the 3 that you see, and it looks like it's going to be Eves and John around the full chop regarding that playoff spot. And then you got you had Sergey there, and then you had Travis, John, and Brandon sort of sitting out, making the last 3. Let's look ahead. I mean, I think this is still relevant for both of you. In terms of this time in 2025, 2026, Brandon wants me to say 2027. So between any of those years, 2025 come 2027, how do you think the same rankings of the teams that you just went through, what does the league look like?
That's a good question. It's kind of hard to project out, I find, because where we have such a huge amount of the picks in the upcoming years. Like I feel like Eve's team, for example, his average age is like almost 30 years old, I think, or 31 years old. So he's going to be hurting for a lot of the years to come and doesn't really have any draft capital whatsoever stored away. So I think he's down. He's obviously, in my opinion, the favorite for a very sharp decline in terms of success. So I'd put him near the bottom, which is bizarre because, I mean, I guess that's just how it works, where you're one of the top teams right now, and then you could be absolute shit for the next 4 years just because those picks aren't available to really pick anything up. So I would say he's at the bottom. Automatically, I would put Brandon number 1 just with the sheer volume of picks. I would like to think that I'll be up. I don't necessarily think I might be number 2, but I think I'll be like a steady top 4 from that point forward, just with the couple key pieces that, depending how the expansion goes too, that could change absolutely everything. If you can't really, like, I've only got a few absolute anchor pieces between Naj and Judy and Joe. Like if I build around those 3 guys, I feel like I can kind of fill out the rest of the roster pretty strongly. Yeah, and then I would basically just go the inverse order of the way everyone is now. So like Kyle, for example, I think his team is, I don't think he's overly old at this point, but his quarterback situation's nice, but like Saquon's coming to the end, even though he's still young, he's just so injured and his situation just kind of sucks. He's got Diggs, Evans. So yeah, he'd probably be, if I project out like 2026, I would say he's more on the back end now too. Yeah, I would honestly, I think the way that I ranked it for this current season, I would just do the inverse of that. Basically, I know that's probably the standard answer for it because it is the most logical way to forecast it out and how it should unfold. But I feel pretty confident just with the lack of picks that are coming up during that time that nobody's going to be able to kind of get to the place where they're putting in a bunch of young key pieces. Again, the expansion could completely throw that off, but it's not like you're going to lose your entire team at that point too. So you should be pretty safe.
Yeah, I think I hope that's how it all goes. And I think, I think our teams especially are set to go that way. Looking obviously at Tim, I don't see Tim falling off anytime soon. I think Tim still has a good balance of young guys and draft picks. So looking just the three of us on this panel, I wouldn't be surprised if we're the ones kind of battling it out 2026, 2027, if everything according to plan.
I'm excited because I think just wrapping up the video here, right? Like I think the biggest thing that I'm really excited about is I feel like we have the great experiment in three of us here.
Exactly.
Right? Like there was a way that I went, and then Brandon's taking the best lessons learned there, applying his own flavor to it. Travis, you're dealing with the state of the market that's very different than it's ever been because of what Brandon's done. And I think a lot of these are going to come in because you have pieces, I have pieces, but I got as many first rounds as I could just with, 6 active managers versus 8. Brandon was able to go in, but the difference is he got all the 8 active managers and got the first round picks, but he's got no player to build around anymore. Whereas Travis, you have some of those pieces. Maybe you don't have as, Darth of a war chest as Brandon does on the first round picks, but the second rounders are going to be always value, right? If you look at the roster of the hits on the second, it's a 30% hit rate versus the first round being 50, right? So ultimately, I think a lot of these are going to play out. And I think 5 years from now, a lot of the rest of the league is going to take the lessons learned from what the three of us are doing right now in the first 2-3 years of Dynasty and Cool Cats and Kittens.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, Tim, you have 2 first round picks this year too. So like as loaded as your roster is, like you have a 102 and a 108, I believe. So you have
I have 3. I have 101, 102, and 109.
Yeah. So I mean, like you're loaded. You're loaded now, and you're going to be able to pick up some unreal pieces in this draft. So yeah, I mean, I would say that I'm going to do the quick swap on my rankings there, and I'll give you the 1-1, Brandon the 1-2, and I'll take the 1-3 or 4.
Oh, you're putting me up from not making the playoffs to 101. Okay, that's a political answer. I appreciate that.
No, I just went through and looked, and like you don't even have Ridley active right now. Like your quarterback situation's unreal with Allen and Murray, Jonathan Taylor, Swift, Lamb. Yeah, like you're set.
We'll see. I mean, I think this is the beauty of Dynasty because I look back at 3 years ago, and then if you look had everyone on Reddit, for example, guess what the value will be come 2023, it made no sense, right?
Yeah.
And CD Lamb, I need him to become our receiver 1. We don't know. I have no idea. AJ Brown in his new situation, who the hell knows? And I think that's this is the coolest thing that we're experiencing live together for the first time as Dynasty managers. I know Kyle's played a little bit of Dynasty, but for us, it's all, first timers. So it's been great. And like you said, I think there's a lot of lessons learned that we've taken from this offseason that we're going to apply to the next. So Travis, I just want to sort of sign off here. Thanks for joining us on this call. I'm excited for you to be part of our league. I'm excited for us to continue building this out for the next 10, 20, 30 years. I hope we're going to be 6 years old, retired, and still talking about Cool Cats and Kittens. So excited to have someone like you thinking about it.
That's awesome, guys. Thank you so much for having me. And I can't wait to get going. Can't wait to get down to Vegas in a couple months here. And long live Jerry Sands.
Yes.